Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this week's video, I'm going to be making over not one, but two bedside tables that are a little bit mismatched, and I'm going to use another brand new transfer design. So this is how I'm starting out with these particular nightstands, and I've already done quite a lot of the prep work for this because they needed the wax stripping off them. I've already done a previous video showing that, and I'll link it now if you want to go and have a look at that process. There's no point me keeping repeating myself on videos, so I've skipped that part and we've gone straight to this part. So as you can see, there's some marks on the top of this bedside, and there's a big kind of slice of lighter wood there, which looks like it's been maybe bleached by the sun or something. So I'm hoping that the stain will kind of disguise that. So like I said, I'm hoping the stain is going to disguise the discoloration on the top of the nightstand that I'm currently working on. And these are a pair of mismatched bedsides. So the one that I'm working on is slightly larger than the other one. It's also got an alcove or a cubby, the one that I'm working on at the moment. So to kind of make that a kind of pair, or so that they kind of tie together, I'm using the colour Cactus, and I'm painting the interiors of these both the same colour so that they appear to be more matched. And 9 times out of 10, if I'm painting the interior of something, I will always use silk mineral paint, and that's because it's really durable. It's got a built-in top coat, it's got a built-in stain blocking primer. The colour that I'm using is Cactus. It's a really nice kind of soft cottagey green, so that's going to hopefully tie in with the floral design that I'm going to put on the outside. So this is the second bedside, and like I say, I'm just going to give it a couple of coats of Cactus, and that way they kind of will be tying in together. So as I mentioned, I'm going to use a stain for the exterior of these, and I'm using a water-based stain from Dixie Belle Paint called Voodoo Gel Stain, and this colour is called Au Naturel, and it gives a really nice kind of raw wood bleached effect, and it also takes any warmth out of the wood. So pine is notoriously kind of yellowy or orangey depending on the age and type of pine, so this is just going to take all of those kind of warmer tones out. If you use it on other types of wood, obviously the effects are going to be slightly different. And the way that I use it, the first coat I apply, I just do a light spritz of water over the surface, and then I apply a small bit of stain onto an applicator pad, and then just rub it in the direction of the wood grain. You can build this stain up as well, so if you want more coverage, you can add more layers. If you want a more sheer finish and one coat is enough, then that's equally as fine as well. I actually did 2 coats of the stain on these nightstands just because I had some discoloration on the top of one, and it did work. It did even out and cover those stains up. And I'm going to use a brand new transfer design from Dixie Belle Paint called Pink Pampas and Dried Wilds. And this transfer is made up of lots of separate components, which enables you to build a completely unique design every single time you use it. So for this particular design, I'm not going to use the large pieces of pampas grass because they're too big for this kind of framework that I've got here. So all I'm going to do is just chop out all of the components of the dried flowers, and that way I can kind of start to construct. You can see all the different pieces here, so I've chopped those out, so I've got all my separate elements, and that way I can start to construct the design that I want on the front. Okay, I've sped this part up because it is a bit of trial and error with kind of using a little bit of painter's tape and sticking on the sort of separate flowers so that you can get a good idea of where you want to place things. And some of the elements I didn't use on the transfer, so I've set them aside and I can use them for another project. So obviously I've got 2 separate bedsides that have got 2 different shaped kind of frameworks on the front of the doors, so I wanted to fill that framework, otherwise it would have looked a little bit strange. So for the one that I'm working on now, I'm using the ones with the longer stems. Obviously you can cut them down as well, but I didn't want to leave myself sort of short of the longer stems for this particular bedside. So I started with these first, and I wanted to create the height in the kind of background, and then the ones with the shorter stems, I wanted to kind of make those appear kind of at the sides, so that the height was in the center and then it flowed nicely down to the sides. So if you have got a transfer that's got lots of separate elements and you're a little bit unsure of how to place them and how to create a design, my advice would be to chop them all up into separate pieces like I've done, and just have a play around with them with some painter's tape, and play around with a position, because that way you haven't committed to applying them and then you can't really take a transfer off once it's on. You can paint over it and you can sand it off, but obviously you can't reuse it. So it's a good idea to kind of have a play around first before you commit to applying it. So as you can see, I was just kind of playing around with placements of these. The really nice thing about this transfer is that the colour schemes work with pretty much anything that you put on it. So the colour scheme is very kind of muted and kind of warm tone. So you've got like the reds, the oranges, the pinks, and they all work really well with each other. So you don't have to worry about any of the colours clashing at all. I just wanted to make sure that the placement looked right on the front of the bedside. So this is kind of where I left it with this one. Although I knew I wanted to add more, I just kind of left it where it was for a second and moved on to the other one. Also, whilst I was just kind of doing that, I wanted to use the existing handles, and I wanted to make them look like white kind of pottery handles. So I primed them using Grey Boss, which is Dixie Belle's stain blocking primer, because pine has a tendency to bleed through, and I'm obviously going to be painting these white. So I just put that to one side once I'd done a couple of coats of Grey Boss to dry, so that I can paint those white at a later date. So this is the second nightstand. As you can see, the area that I'm going to put my transfer is more of a landscape orientation than the other bedside, which was more of a portrait orientation. And I thought I was going to struggle more with this because the transfer is made up of quite long kind of stemmy pieces. But it wasn't. I actually found this side easier. So I just, again, did exactly the same process, got myself a little bit of painter's tape, and just played around with placements and made sure I was happy with those before I applied them. If you struggle with remembering your placement, where you've kind of taped your pieces temporarily, I'll get my words out. What you can do is take your phone and take a picture of them taped in place, and that way you can refer back to that picture, because I'm terrible for forgetting. I'll tape the pieces in place and I'll think, yeah, that was really good, and then I'll come to apply them and I'll forget what went where. So I do take a picture on my phone if I can, and that way, like I say, you've got a point of reference to just go back to. And then with the final kind of stemmy pieces, I went back to the first nightstand and just filled in any kind of gaps that I wanted to fill in. It is always good to have a little bit of negative space, I think, just to let your kind of design breathe a little bit. But I did want to kind of fill in, there was a little bit of a gap, and I just thought it could just add a little bit of something extra. So I ended up adding a trio of kind of dusky pink roses on the very top there, and that kind of made the most of the height and kind of elongated the design. And also, this is off camera because I didn't manage to capture it, my camera battery ran out, but when I had the design in place and I'd finished putting all of the different pieces on, I just went over it with a microfiber cloth and sort of pressed down. So that's known as burnishing. You can also do it with a finishing pad, which is a Dixie Belle product. But for this particular design, because it is quite delicate and all the kind of petals are quite fine, I just went in with a microfiber cloth and just rubbed it down, and that way you get rid of any kind of halo marks around the transfer, and it just makes sure that all of the different aspects are really kind of stuck down properly to the surface before you seal it. So to seal my transfer, I used a clear coat in matte. That way it's just going to give me a really kind of low kind of sheen. And you can use any water-based clear coat from Dixie Belle. It's compatible with all of them except Gator Hide. Transfers and Gator Hide don't really mix very well. It tends to they just don't play together. Equally, oil-based products aren't the best to use with transfers either, so avoid Howdy Do hemp oil. Avoid Big Mama's butter putting over the top of transfers, but the clear coats are absolutely fine. Also, the Easy Peasy spray wax works really well, and so does Best Dang Wax. I'm just using a clear coat because I've used a water-based stain. That obviously needs sealing. These are going to be nightstands, so I did want to give them a little bit more protection than what my usual wax product would do. So I'm sealing it all over with clear coat, and I'm just using a Dixie Belle synthetic flat large brush. This is a brush that I allocate specifically for top coat, so it doesn't have any kind of paint in it or the bristles aren't clogged with anything else. And I just use a really light hand and I applied 2 coats over the nightstands. And I said I wasn't going to use wax to seal, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to use wax at all. So I went in with some Best Dang Wax in brown, which you all know I use on most projects. And I'm using a premium chip brush. And all I'm going to do is just introduce a little bit of brown around the edges and that framework of the flowers. And this is just going to add a little bit of shading because they are looking kind of flat. So I'm just going to add a little bit of shading, and also this kind of makes it look like really old antique pine, which it isn't. They are quite modern pieces. So this is just going to add that really nice kind of browny kind of tone to the pine. It looks like it's aged a little bit and just gives it a little bit of character. So I am actually using Dixie Belle's bag of rags to buff this off. So as you can see, it's kind of looking a bit patchy now, the brown wax on there. And these bag of rags are lint-free rags that Dixie Belle are now selling for you to use on your upcycle projects. So this is basically going to take the excess off the surface and just kind of smooth everything out so it's not so patchy. As always, there's a couple of close-ups so you can see the detail on the transfer is absolutely gorgeous. That's the interior. You can see the cactus kind of works really nicely with the raw wood look. And here's the final shot. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks as always for watching. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and I will catch you next time. Bye!